Hey there friends, this is Brent Harris. I'm a productivity coach, and in this video I'd like to talk about how to orient yourself properly towards time. This is a lesson that has been pretty huge in my life in the last week, in the last couple weeks, and what makes it interesting to me, and the reason why I want to talk about it so much, is because there's sort of a little tweak that can be made in how we orient ourselves toward time, that if we do it, it just suddenly opens up a lot of access to a lot of our inner resources that allow us to move into productivity or to move into sustainable high-level productivity. And so these resources being like greater imagination, deeper connection with and access to your imagination, your intuition, being able to move more intuitively, becoming more clear, much more clear in your decision making, much more clear in your thinking, becoming way more grounded, way more stable, and also just in a place where you're enjoying yourself a little bit more, where life kind of goes from taking on this texture of hostility and difficulty and stress, and you can move from that into a place of way more ease and congruence and way more enjoyment, and just being in a place where it doesn't feel like life is so much against you anymore. So it's a pretty big shift. It's pretty foundational, and a lot of it comes from our relationship with time. And so it's very important stuff. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it with you today. So the thesis, like the main center point that we're going to be discussing in terms of going from what to what, which orientation to which orientation, is going from an orientation of scarcity of time to abundance of time. The main idea being that we all have the same amount of time, and time at its very, very core isn't either abundant nor scarce. It's just there. It just is what it is. It runs deeper than any of these frames that we would come at it from. And so therefore, we choose which perspective is more helpful, and my argument being that coming at it from an abundance perspective is much more helpful, and I will demonstrate how. But that's the main thing. So the scarcity mindset, being scarce around time, is to consider time like it's running out, like I don't have enough time. Time is a wasting. I'm behind on where I'm supposed to be at this point in my life, so therefore I have to double down. I have to go faster and faster and faster. How can I go faster? I'm behind other people. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, like this kind of thing. That's the sort of the effect of time is scarce. There's a sense of like my window is closing, whether it's over the course of like the day or the course of the week or the course of your lifetime. It's like, oh my God, time is running out, and I have this purpose, or I have this thing that I must do before I die, or I must do before the day is out, and I have to get it done before the day closes. I have to get there, just in time. And that is literally a psychological bedrock that we live from. Almost all of us, everybody that I talk to anyway, we always live from some extent or another from this place of time is running out and I have to get there before time runs out. And that's our psychology. Like, how stressful is that? It's so scary and so unpleasant and so unneeded. So by contrast, coming at it from this place of abundance, abundance is a little bit more like, there's nothing in particular to do on a fundamental level. On a fundamental level, there's nothing to do, in the sense that I am, as a person, complete. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing that just needs to be accomplished in order for it to be okay for me to die, basically. And so therefore, because of that, I'm free to live my life as I want. So I'm free to spend my time as I want. Everything is extra. If I wake up in the morning, or if I wake up at the beginning of a week, or if I'm looking at a brand new year ahead of me and I'm going to assume that I'm going to live for the whole year and not die before the year is over, then that is a gift, in the sense that, like, not gift from an obligatory sense, but gift in the sense of like, wow, I can really use this the way I want. It bears mentioning that people say like every day is a gift, right? But sometimes when we receive gifts, like, we're really receiving an obligation, right? If you get a gift from somebody, it's like you have to use it. You have to show that you like it. You can't give it away. You can't give it back. You have to kind of, sometimes you receive a gift and there's a string attached. But in this case, we want to orient ourselves towards time in such a way that the day really is a gift, in that we can do whatever the hell we want with it. Even if that means we sleep in, even if we waste the time, even if nothing gets done, or if we want to be busy. But there's no judgment about it. There's no judgment about how we spend this time. There's no true right or wrong. There's no true good or bad. That is the depth of our freedom. And that's the depth of the freedom that comes from a place of orienting ourselves toward time properly. So that's the major thing that we're going to get into. There's some objections that come up, say like, a really, really big objection that comes up is, well, I have a lot of responsibility. I have children, or I have pets, or I have work that I have to take care of these things. I can't just do whatever the hell I want. I'm not free to do whatever the hell I want because I have to do these things. But I'm just speaking to a much more ground level freedom that is basically, you don't have to do anything. There's nothing that you have to do. All obligation and all sense of obligation is ultimately imaginary. It's not true. Everything that you do is from choice, but sometimes the choice is very clear. If you're a parent and you have to feed your kid and you don't want your kid to go hungry, you still choose to feed your child and not let your child go hungry. And that is a choice you made. And so an element of this conversation is reclaiming that choice, even when it feels like there isn't choice. Because when we reclaim choice, that's how we step back into power as well. So that's an element of the conversation, but I'm going to keep it on the subject of time as much as possible. Just suffice to say that time itself is a gift for you alone, and you can do whatever the hell you want with it as long as you're willing to reap the consequences of whatever your choice is. That taste of freedom, though, that is where the creativity, that's where the resourcefulness comes in. So I hope that's clear enough. Right, okay, so coming out from abundance of time, time isn't running out. It's not running out. Time is only ever running out if we truly believe that something must happen before the door closes, before the opportunity closes. The problem with this kind of thinking, the belief in time running out and the belief that something must happen before the door closes, is that on a deep level, we truly believe that it would create some sort of consequence that would be so big it would overwhelm us, like a consequence that would be too intense or too enormous for us if that thing passed. And that is also a false belief as well. Good. Okay, and then one last thing before I get into the next piece is releasing impatience and urgency. So what it feels like to operate from an abundance of time and to be oriented towards time in such a way that there's an abundance of time, it feels like a lack of urgency and it feels like a lack of impatience. So in other words, there's no sense of trying to get to some point in the future, whereupon when you get to that point in the future, then you'll be finally okay. Then you can finally relax. Then you're finally able to live your life as you want. Part of what we're doing in this discussion is making that point this point and deleting everything in between this point and that point so that you can really, truly occupy this moment now. You can truly occupy your life now as it is and reclaim that sense of choice and that sense of power. And to step into this experience that you're waiting for. So this can be that. Because if you are willing to do that, if you're willing to delete the conditions between where you are now and this kind of point that you're hoping to arrive at in your life at some point, so that there's no distance, so that the distance collapses, and so that that moment becomes this moment right now, that's when shit starts to get really juicy. That's when things start to get really interesting. And that's when you start really stepping into your power and just feeling powerful and going about your life in such a way where It's so rich and so profound, and every moment, on a moment-by-moment basis, is so enough. It's enough in and of itself that there's no need to skip through it. In fact, your tendency to want to skip through some aspect of your life, whether it's brushing your teeth, whether it's walking from one place to the other, getting in your car and driving, you don't want to skip beyond any of it anymore, because all of it is very clearly a gift. And again, not an obligatory gift, but a gift like a resource for you to do whatever you want with. It's extra, and it becomes really precious automatically on its own when you practice this orientation. So one exercise, I was going to save this for the end, but I'll offer it to you now. An exercise that you can try to make this real right now is, number one, take a moment to define what that point is for you. What point are you trying to arrive at in your life where it's like, when I get to this point, then I'll be free. Then I'll be okay. Then I'll finally be stable. Then I can finally do whatever I want. So what it would define, what is that point in the future that you're trying to get to, and put it into words. What is it? I suggest pausing this video and working it out. What point are you trying to get to? And what's the name of it so that we can have a name for it that we can refer to? So that's number one. Number two is, what conditions are in the way? And there's no need to list them all out, but just kind of glimpse in your imagination, just glimpse at all the conditions that seem to be in between you and this point. So look at all the time that needs to pass. Look at all the money you need and resources you need. Look at all the things that need to happen. And then number three is, would you be willing to soften your grip on the belief that all these conditions must be met in order to arrive at this state? In other words, would you be willing to entertain the idea that this state that you're talking about of freedom, we'll just call it freedom, groundedness, is actually something that's available right now, and that you can access it right now? You are likely resistant to this idea because you might think, well, no, I don't want to allow this right now, even though maybe I could. Even if I could, I don't want to, because then I run the risk of not actually meeting all these conditions and not doing all the stuff that I want to do. I'll just shut down. I'll just collapse. I'll become lazy. I won't do anything anymore. You really believe on some level that it is your dissatisfaction and your discomfort and your stress that is what is motivating you to move forward. This is false. Because what people find, what I have found, and what I believe you will find is, if you allow these conditions to collapse and you step into this freedom that you want right now, this fulfillment, because like it's a subjective experience. So you have all the equipment and hardware to make it happen. It's not anywhere else, right? It's available now. All the neurotransmitters and whatever else. So if you were to step into it now, there would be this great sense of centeredness, this great sense of wellness and stability that would come in, sense of wholeness, of coming home. And then here you would stand with an ocean of time ahead of you, whether it's another hour, another day, another month, another year. And what you realize experientially, subjectively, is that there's nothing to do. There's nothing that you need to do. There's nothing about you that's lacking. There's nothing about you that's incomplete. There's nothing about you to be done. And by that token, do whatever you want. What I believe you'd find, if you were to give this to yourself as a gift, is that you might actually take it easy for a little while. You might take it down a notch if you're stressed, if you're busy, if you do a whole lot. You might chill, you might play video games or whatever. But the thing is that we only really procrastinate and waste time when we feel obligated towards life, towards our responsibilities, towards our potential, towards the greater creations that we hope to create in our lives. when we feel bothered by it, bullied by it, obligated to it, like we're disappointing ourselves and failing ourselves and letting ourselves down, when we feel that way about our life's purpose, it makes us want to put it off and procrastinate and play video games. But when you step into this knowing that we're talking about here, where like it truly doesn't matter the extent to which you fulfill your life's purpose, it doesn't truly matter how much you create out in the world from a universal foundational standpoint. And that you're just free to do as much or as little of it as you want. And all of it's extra. All of it's just bonus. All of it is just a gift. Then you may find, especially if you find yourself to be like a really lazy person, you may find that something would open up in you, a desire to just go ahead and start creating whatever you want. Music, art, architecture, or maybe you want to study something. Maybe you want to read a book. Maybe you want to exercise, go for a walk. It's interesting because whatever would bring you into greater balance and wellness. So for example, if you find that you're not exercising enough and your body's really craving exercise, then you would just naturally find yourself exercising. You would go and exercise in a way that makes sense for you. The body and the system and the psychology would start to move into homeostasis because we remove all the polarization, to point to our last video. All the polarization would be resolved around like what I want to do, as opposed to what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. That polarity collapses so that all the obligation is gone and you're just left with whatever the hell you want to do. My fridge broke recently. We're doing a renovation in my house, myself and my family, and we had to move the fridge from out of the kitchen because it's time to renovate the kitchen. So we moved it out and then we like plugged it back in, and like we plugged it back in and just it didn't get cold anymore. It just stopped being a fridge. And we're like, holy shit, we need a fridge, right? Just imagine like in your own life, imagine you just don't have a fridge anymore. Like it's like, oh my God, like this becomes a pretty big emergency. And this was like Sunday, and we were kind of hoping it would turn on overnight, and then it didn't. Then Monday morning came around, and Monday morning, like I'm supposed to like see clients and do work and make videos for you and all this stuff, and I wasn't able to do any of that because I needed to get a fridge. And so like the whole day, basically up until 3 p.m., I had to spend hitting up Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, finding buyers. And if you've done this before, the experience is like, it's like really difficult. So like all this trouble, and I have to drive, and it's like a long way both ways to get the fridge. And I'm just, and really the whole day is getting wasted as I'm like getting like these 2 mini bar fridges to put in. And I started getting agitated, like, oh, I'm falling behind on my work. But then I started falling so completely far behind that it almost like the day sort of collapsed, in the sense that I was no longer trying to you get back on track, trying to, salvage the day. It's almost like I started writing off the day and started turning it into a 3-day weekend almost. And what that did was, at first, immediately, as soon as I made that little switch, I was driving the car and I made this psychological switch, my body uncontracted right away. So all the stress started to dissolve, and I started to open up to enjoyment of, this is kind of nice. I'm just driving along rural Ontario, farm streets, beautiful sunny day. It's actually really pleasant. And just having a nice time. And then coming back home, it's like 4 p.m. at this point, and I had this thought of like, okay, well, maybe I'll just see if I can put something up on Reddit. Reddit's where I do all my marketing for my coaching, and I've been having a really hard time with it lately, but I thought, okay, here's what I want to write about, and I put something up, and then that post, it just did really well. It just exploded in popularity, got all these upvotes, brought all this business in, all these subscribers. It was just, it just made me a lot of money. It was just like a really, really good thing in total. And the reason why it's successful, I'm convinced, is because I was grounded in an abundance of time mentality. I was oriented properly towards time. I wasn't trying to catch up with myself. I wasn't trying to make my targets or my numbers, or I wasn't trying to hit goal numbers before the window closed on me. the post and everything that I did came from this place of extra, of just, I want to offer this article to the world. I don't need anything right now, and so I just gave. And that carried a sort of an energetic signature, which just like was able to help and serve a lot of humanity and help serve my business as well. So I'm telling you this to sort of demonstrate the power that comes and the resourcefulness from really operating from this centered place of, I have all the time I need and there's nothing about myself that I need to complete. I hope this is becoming clear now as we talk about it. So I'll just check my notes here. Okay, yeah, something to note as well. The campaign of the self starts off as fun and gets too serious. It's one of my notes. So when I say the campaign of the self, I mean, like, take a minute to sort of step back and look at your life and look at your life situation and look at all the things that you hope to get done in your life, and look at all the stuff that needs to get done in your immediate future, your medium future, and your long-term future, and just turn it all into like a big ball of like shit that needs to get done. And again, just as before, look at this ball of shit that needs to get done, and what are you convinced about this ball? Like, are you convinced that all this stuff needs to get done before your time runs out? Period. Like, is that what you're convinced of? You must get this done. And honestly, what is the consequence of not getting it done in time? What risks happening? What is the punishment? What's the hell that you risk running into if all this stuff doesn't get done? So is any of that true? Because my argument is no, that when there's some sort of hell set up for us where, like, if I don't get this done on time, then I'm going to run into some terrible, terrible outcome, that is when we start creating hell for ourselves in real life. Because, here we go. The threat of hell is hell. To actually arrive in hell is a relief, because now it's done. At least it's done. It's sort of how, like, when we're really stressed about something potentially happening and it finally happens, despite how terrible it is, it's like, at least the worry is over. At least the stress is over. At least the stress is finally validated. I wonder if you can relate to that. That's kind of a weird thing, but it's an interesting concept. The threat of hell is hell. So you look at all this stuff that needs to get done. Oh, I need to get it all done. I need to get it all done. And this fear of not getting it all done. And that becomes the tension that you live your life from. So you can replace all this and go, like, imagine just saying out loud. So here's another technique that you can work with to bring this into your experience. Try saying out loud, there's nothing I have to get done. There's nothing I have to get done. There's nothing to do. I don't need to get anything done. And that's the truth. Because you don't have to do any of this. You'll receive the consequences, of course, of not doing it. And that is what it is. And maybe they're really bad consequences. Maybe you don't want those consequences, so you'll still get all this stuff done. Fine, good. But at least you're doing it from choice. And you're doing it from a sense that there's nothing truly to be afraid of. There's nothing truly to be afraid of. Ultimately, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just a few more notes. So, okay. So we have two things going on here. I realize, like, we've kind of gone in a lot of places in this conversation, and I don't want to, like, you know, like, put too much on the plate, but there's so much to cover in this sort of subject. But, you know, if I were to kind of bring it all in, on one hand, and I suggest going into my earlier videos on depolarization to really get a really deep understanding of what we're about to get into here, but when we talk about time, there's a fear of time running out and that creating some kind of hellish landscape for us. And then on the other hand, there's a sense of, here's all the stuff I need to get done before time runs out so that I can enter my heavenly experience where I will have finally made it and all is well. And so just bring your awareness there. Bring your awareness in the fact that you find yourself in sort of a limbo and there's a bunch of stuff that you feel like you have to do. And there's a hell that you're trying to avoid and there's a heaven you're trying to set yourself into. You're trying to get into. And the heaven keeps evading your grasp. You never quite get there. And the hell is always threatening. It never quite arrives either, but it's always threatening. It's always coming closer. It's always like you feel the heat and it makes you more and more afraid. You can step out of this and orient yourself properly towards time by accepting and allowing the truth that the heaven that you're trying to get into is a state that you can operate from now. You do that by deleting all the conditions between that and now. And if you do that, then you step into power and resourcefulness and clarity and creativity. And the threat of hell goes away. It was always just a belief. It was never real. And then everything is extra. Now you're free to just do as you wish, to resume all of your responsibilities as much as you want. But now there's no more obligation. In the place of obligation, there's responsibility that you choose or don't choose. And this is your point of power. And this is the proper orientation towards time. Come at life from an abundance. It's all extra. You are complete. There's nothing in particular that you must do. And so therefore you're free to do anything. And from that freedom too, it's not a laziness. There's no laziness here. There's velocity. You can have the velocity of any of these performers that you admire. The Elon Musks, the Bill Gateses, the Bezoses, if you're oriented that way, or other people that you admire, speakers, performers, musicians, artists, people that put out all this work. There's such energy, there's such intensity. You can go as hard as you want. There's no more fear. This conversation is deleting the fear from all of that so that you're free to go at this with abandon, to become more productive and double down on your productivity, knowing it's just a game and playing it and giving, like, there's seriousness. You're still serious as hell, but but there's an irony. There's a hidden irony in the background where it's just play. Remember Miss Frizzle in the Magic School Bus? She was always cool. Even when shit started hitting the fan, she was always cool. That's the game. Always be cool. Sign up for my email list. You can get a free video online training of sustainable high-level productivity. I just share it's like an information-dense series of videos on how to move into high-level productivity. Highly recommend it. If you want, get a live coaching session with me for just $5. Link for that is below. Link for all that's below. Please like this video, comment, please subscribe. Please help me support this channel. I'd be so grateful. No obligation, but if you feel like other people should be exposed to this, then please indicate so by liking the video. Thank you. Goodbye.